The pioneer women. The women on the Llano and Seja played a great part in the history of the land. It was a difficult life for a woman, but she had made her choice when in the marriage ceremony she had promised to obey and follow her husband. It may not have been her choice, since parents may have decided for her. It was the Spanish custom to make matches for the children. Whether through choice or tradition, the women had to be a hardy lot in order to survive the long trips by wagon or carriage and the separation from their families if their families were not among those who were settling on the Llano. The women had to know the curative powers of plants and in midwifery, for these were no doctors for 200 miles or more. The knowledge of plant medicine is an inheritance from the Moors and brought to New Mexico by the first Spanish colonizers. From childhood, we are taught the name of herbs, weeds, and plants that have curative potency. Even today, when we have doctors at immediate call, we still have great faith in plant medicine. Certainly, this knowledge of home remedies was a source of comfort to the women who went out to the Llano, yet their faith in God helped more than anything in the survival. Every village had its own curandera or medica, and the ranchers rode many miles to bring the medicine woman or midwife from a distant village or neighboring ranch. Quite often the wife of the patron was well versed in plant medicine. I know that my grandmother, Dona Estefana Delgado de Baca, although not given the name of Medica, because it was not considered proper in her social class, was called every day by some family in the village or by their empleados to treat a child or some other person in the family. In the fall of the year, she went out to the hills and valleys to gather her supply of healing herbs. When she went to live in La Londra, there were terrible outbreaks of smallpox, and she had difficulty convincing the villagers that vaccination was the solution. Not until she had a godchild in every family was she able to control the dreaded disease. In Spanish tradition, a grandmother takes the responsibility of a real mother, and in that way, grandmother conquered many superstitions where the people had. At least she had the power to decide what should be done for her godchildren. From El Paso, Texas, she secured vaccines from her cousin, Dr. Semenigo. She vaccinated her children, grandchildren, and godchildren against the disease. She vaccinated me when I was 3 years old, and the vaccination has passed any doctor's inspections. As did my grandmother, so all the wives of the patrons held a very important place in the village and ranches on the Llano. The patron ruled the ranch, but his wife looked after the spiritual and physical welfare of the employees and their families. She was the one called when there was a death, illness, misfortune, or good tidings in a family. She was a great social force in the community, more so than her husband. She held the purse strings, and thus she was able to do as she pleased in her charitable enterprises and help those who might seek her assistance. The women in these isolated areas had to be resourceful in every way. They were their own doctors, dressmakers, tailors, and advisors. The settlements were far apart, and New Mexico was a poor territory trying to adapt itself to a new rule. The Llano people had no opportunity for public schools before statehood, but there were men and women who held classes for the children of the patrons in private homes. They taught reading in Spanish and sometimes in English. Those who had means sent their children to school in Las Vegas, Santa Fe, or eastern states. If no teachers were available, the mothers taught their own children to read, and many of the wealthy ranchers had private teachers for their children until they were old enough to go away to boarding schools. Without the guidance and comfort of the wives and mothers, life on the Llano would have been unbearable, and a great deal is owed to the brave pioneer women who ventured into the cruel life of the plains, far from contact with the outside world. Most of them have gone to their eternal rest, and God must have saved a very special place for them to recompense them for their contribution to colonization and religion in an almost savage country.